All right, today I took a trip out in the woods for a change of scenery and to talk a little bit about handling heavier weapons. This is the Skalchion that you've probably seen before. It was made by Matt and Ilya. Very cool, really nice work. But it is currently the heaviest single-handed sword I have. Keep in mind, by the way, I'm not trying to diss their work in any way, shape, or form. I'm just pointing out that this is a little bit heftier than you would normally expect. Usually, most historical swords are surprisingly light, but there's also some variation. For example, with Viking swords that have been found, the archaeological examples vary quite a bit. You know, it can be as little as 1 kilogram, or it can be up to 1.8 or even more, which, again, for a single-handed sword is pretty hefty. A heavier longsword that you would use with two hands weighs that much. So how do you handle that? The simple answer is
grow stronger.
But we don't do simple answers on this channel. So if you had to, and you here being the placeholder for a historical warrior, a fantasy fighter, whatever setting you want, there are some ways to handle these a little better. So what's the problem? First off, the problem isn't necessarily actually striking with them. The problem is doing it effectively and doing it without hurting yourself. Because anyone can just take one of these and just go, you know, baseball swing and put a lot of power into it, accelerate it very well. The problem is people usually don't decelerate them very well. What you see quite often beginners do is they swing a sword and they're like, you know, it drags them around. They have to just kind of step with it. They overturn, which of course in a sword fight would leave you terribly vulnerable. You know, you can't just come in and like this and then stand there for a second. Hello, please end me. The issue with that is twofold. For one, they put too much arm power into it, like this kind of baseball swing, essentially. Sometimes they intuitively use a bit of the body as well, but they don't know how to stop it. You can form a kinetic chain all the way from your legs through your core, into your shoulder, into your arm, into your hand. Looks like this. So now everything is engaged and I'm actually swinging with my body rather than just with the arm. That allows you to put a lot of power into the swing, but there can still be a problem with a heavier sword. If you do that and you don't engage your wrist, so you basically limp-wristed, to use a firearm terminology, what can happen is, even if you engage your core, is this. Because it has so much momentum that requires a lot of force to stop, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So even if with your core strength you can stop the sword, no problem, your wrist might not be able to maintain this position. And if it doesn't, then guess what? Suddenly the wrist is absorbing a lot of that force and it can strain your tendon and cause injury. It's even worse because beginners often make the mistake of, even though they put quite a lot of power into that arm swing, they tend to leave the arm limp. So at the moment of impact, there's no tension in it. Now you don't want to start out with tension. You don't want to go, because that way you're slowing yourself down. What you want is be nice and loose throughout the swing, and as soon as you connect, you want to tense up. So, boom, basically that. I don't know if you can see that, but it starts out loose, and then I tighten it at the moment of impact. Loose, tense. And that can help with this problem. If you focus on making your wrist rigid, not allowing it to bend forward, then you can avoid all these problems. Now, if you start out with a handshake grip, which you do with a lot of types of sword, granted, it's usually not the heavy type, but if you do that, it can be a little easier to do that. In fact, I still find myself doing it every now and then. If I do a swing with a handshake grip, sometimes I find myself just going a little bit too far with the wrist. So you really have to learn at the moment of impact to just keep it rigid. Like this cannot move during the swing. So that allows you to actually stop the sword. This is for something with moderate weight, basically. And I can do it with this, but I can't go 100% full force, because then I I don't manage to stop it in time. If I go full force and swing the sword as fast as I can, I have no chance of stopping this without hurting myself. You don't always have to stop the cut in front of you. That's something you might do with sword and buckler, for example. But with this, pretty much forget about it. If you do that, then it's not going to be a very powerful cut to begin with. I should probably also clarify the term overswinging. So if I cut like this, say, this is not overswinging. This is not overswinging. This is overswinging. The difference is, not only is the blade pretty far away, so it takes quite a while to deploy it again to defend against the opponent, but also you've lost your balance, basically. Your structure has been compromised, you're turned away from the opponent. This, on the other hand, is fine. If you can't or don't want to stop the sword early, what do? Well, you follow all the way through and then you bring it back up to a guard. Because generally in sword fighting, you want to begin in a guard and you want to end in a guard. There are a number of different guards. You know, this is a guard, this is a guard, this is a guard. In fact, all the different stages of a cut are guards in and of themselves. I don't want to go too deep into guards right now, that would be too much of a tangent, but the point is simply that a guard is a functional position. Like, you're able to perform both offensive and defensive actions from there effectively. Whereas this is not a guard. If, on the other hand, you allow the sword to follow through and then keep using the momentum to bring it up, that's okay. So let's say the camera is the target. I pass through the target. Now I can roll this over and bring it up. And of course, watch where it is. You don't want to end up doing this, you know, bonk. Smash yourself in the eye with a guard or something like that. Sometimes in videos it can look close, even though it really isn't, you know, depending on the angle. So this is not close to my head. Boom. To make sure, especially in the beginning, that you don't go too far. So, for example, try to stop here. Don't go all the way here, because then you, again, might knock yourself in the back of the head. If you're more experienced, you can absolutely recover to a retracted guard. So this is perfectly fine. You're immediately ready for the next cut. Same with the downward. So boom, and it comes around. You don't have to come around like this. You can also just do it in front of you. In fact, it's better, because if you cut like this and then just move the sword in front of you the way you see here, you're covering yourself better. You're not even moving the blade behind your body at all, so it protects you very well. The same thing is true for top-heavy weapons like warhammers, maces, axes, etc. Ironically, this warhammer here actually weighs less than the falchion, but the balance is different. Now, if I balance this, you can see it's basically the reverse. So it has most of the mass here. So that means, again, it's hard to stop it here because you've got all this lever working against you, amplifying the force. Of course, that force is supposed to go into the opponent, and when it does, you don't have to worry about any of this. If I swing and hit, it's stopped immediately. I don't have to worry about it. If I swing and miss, I have to recover. That's the ideal. On impact, the energy is absorbed by the opponent and you don't need to worry about any kind of follow-up. But in a fight against an opponent that doesn't want to be hit and will take evasive action, etc., that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you miss. So if you miss, you can't just be like, oh crap, wait a second. So in this case, with something like that, again, you can follow through, use the momentum. And in this case, as you keep moving it, you don't have to keep the wrist rigid. You can, in fact, use the wrist to keep moving it around, keep, you know, this is very little effort right here, because this is just, the inertia is doing everything, and I'm just guiding it essentially. So that makes it very easy. Now you can still, of course, if you completely overextend your wrist. Even if you do this, that might still not be ideal. But this is really more of a problem if you try to stop it. Then the wrist needs to be rock solid, otherwise it'll overextend and cause injury. So this way you can swing pretty hard, boom, and immediately come back around. And this, by the way, can be misinterpreted in a fictional scene. You know, it can look like silly twirling. Like if I just stand here and do this, I'm not actually using this in any way offensively or tactically or what have you. Whereas this is an attack. This actually does something. You allow the weight to kind of pendulum around, and then you can just direct it upward, because that momentum goes down, and as it swings, it goes up. So you allow the weight of the hammerhead to basically pull it up. So that preserves some energy, which of course you want in a fight. Now if I swing it in a crosswise pattern and then just let it rest on my shoulder, it's faster, but at the same time requires less energy than going 1, 2, 3. There are other biomechanical tricks to conserve energy as well. For example, if I have the hammer resting down here and I want to go to a high guard, if I try to pull the hammer upward, or rather, basically I push the hammerhead upward, and then I allow it to come to this position. That's a less effective way of doing it. So you guide the hammerhead. The easier way is just pull on the handle. The hammerhead, due to its mass, will want to stay down anyway. So if you simply pull on the handle, you're going to end up in this position anyway. If you have to adjust, yeah, you can push it out a little more. And because I just previously uploaded a video about sword safety, it's up here if you haven't seen it yet, a few words of caution here. If you're getting into sword practice or any kind of historical armed practice, don't just start out trying to do this immediately. Especially with something like this. This can hit you if you do it poorly. You know, if you stay too close to your body, you might hit yourself in the arm like this. So do it slowly first. Just do boom, just follow through the motion and follow the motion with your eyes. Actually make sure you see what's happening and notice whenever you get close to your body and see if you can do something about it. And see which strikes are more likely to get close. And then you can practice it first slowly and then gradually build up speed. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you found it interesting, and have a good one, folks.